Call to order this meeting of the Personnel Board for the sake of reviewing some guidelines for our personnel under this emergency reassignment of duties policy. And I'll let Mike introduce the policies that he's trying to push.
Thank you. So for a little bit of background, 2 weeks ago at the Selectmen's meeting, there were side letters signed and adopted, and also introduced with the different unions, and all but one of those is signed. And that is not in the packet that was sent out to the Personnel Board because it's not what we're reviewing tonight, but I just wanted to give you a little of background information. So the meat of these side letters was that the parties were agreeing to a temporary modification of certain paid leave requirements permitted from March 17th when the Selectmen adopted a state of emergency locally due to COVID-19 pandemic. Employees following CDC guidelines on a quarantine or self-quarantine, whether symptomatic or asymptomatic, would have access to accrued sick leave, and there would be temporary waivers granted for family sick leave. In those side letters with all the departments, it was agreed that if employees in an entire department, division, or building are ordered not to report to work, it would be without loss of pay, and consideration would be given for alternative or staggered work schedules for the health, safety of employees and their families, with the final approval of the town manager. So those were side letters, and as we were just moving into this, we knew that we were going to need more specifics, and tonight we're here to get into the specifics. So the first one I have here is the remote work and telecommuting policy, and this was sent out to all the Personnel Board members, and I just want to see if there are any questions or input on these, but I do want to note that down in section 4 under procedures, that there is one change. It's over to your right in bullet point 2. The date is April 1st. So initially when the law came out, it would have indicated April 2nd. It's actually April 1st now. So that's the only change I have at this point.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Just from an IT security standpoint, the equipment utilized may be owned and maintained by the employee or the town. What are we doing to ensure that no confidential information ends up residing on someone's personal piece of equipment, a laptop or a computer or a phone?
Sure, good question. Thank you, Tracy. So what we're doing is we're using VPN access, so folks are not storing any of their work product on their desktop or their other storage devices. They're actually working on their desktop that resides at their workplace. In my case, it would be at Town Hall. So if I'm to work at home, it'll be from my kitchen table or a desk, and I'm actually moving devices on my computer at work. But I do take what you're saying, and we probably need to re-emphasize with folks that they can't be storing confidential or personal information of that sort.
Yeah.
That's probably worth emphasizing.
I do think we need to put something in about that, because we don't need a bunch of town, documents, data sitting on somebody's personal laptop.
Is there any way if the town supplies laptops that it could be set up so that nobody could download anything from it? And then it's returned when this policy is rescinded?
Sure. So initially that was looked into, and we don't have the supply of laptops to do that. So we have put out the VPN connections for people to do that. So there are some folks, especially in our water department and some in our finance department, that have town-owned laptops and with the connection. So there's no risk there. But yeah, that's a good point to put into that policy. Thank you for that.
Yeah, Mike, this is Dennis. I'm on that same point. utilized. Is that determination, who's that final determination made by? Is it by the employee, by the town, or does it matter?
So that determination is by the town. So for someone to telecommute, they need to have permission of the town manager. So it's, so somebody who's essential functions need them to keep at work. They need to keep coming to work. And they, with the permission of the town manager, then they could work from home. But it's a town decision to do that. If someone decides not to come into work, although their work is supposed to be, at their place of, at their office, then they need to use their own accrued time, vacation, et cetera, unless they're sick or quarantined or self-quarantined.
Yeah, I guess it was more around the equipment. The actual equipment, is that also the town's discretion in terms of the equipment, or is it, as long as the employee has suitable equipment and meets some kind of protocol, that's fine as well?
This is an area that's of steep learning curve where, we never thought we'd face something like this where we'd send a significant part of our workforce home to do necessary work. So we don't have the equipment, and I know that's not a direct answer to your question, Dennis. Nor have we evaluated everyone's home PC or laptop at this point.
Hey, Mike, can I throw an idea in? Besides putting something in about not downloading, because that kind of freaks me out, as you can tell, maybe to Dennis's question/concern, in the procedure, within the telecommuting agreement, it can specifically outline whether it's a town-provided piece of equipment or a personal one.
She lost me on that one. What do you mean outlined? You lost me, Tracy.
Basically, to address Dennis's concern, as I think I'm hearing it, is in the telecommuting agreement that's going to be signed in procedure number 2. Can we just have it noted whether the person, because I'm assuming there's one for each individual, whether they're going to be using a town-provided computer or their own personal?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I think we should keep track of that, because then we're going to know how many are using their own personal laptops versus a town thing. And it can just be in the document each person signs.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. And I was on the phone earlier with our labor attorney who was working on that agreement for us, with me. And we'll get that put in there. If she doesn't already have that in there, I'll make sure that is put in there, because that's a good distinction.
Dennis, does that address?
Yes, yeah, that would be fine. I'm just thinking that it should be understood up front, who is going to own the equipment and operate the equipment, and if it's going to be suitable for the job of telecommuting.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Then my question would be, what happens if their personal equipment is not up to the standards that we need? Who pays for the upgrades? Who pays for the programs? If they use an old Windows program that's not compatible with town stuff, who pays for that?
Question.
If somebody's got an old desktop, they don't even own a laptop, they periodically
Right, so the
use it.
device has to be suitable, otherwise they're gonna have to come into work.
Correct.
Or take vacation time.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the town shouldn't be responsible for upgrading everyone's equipment.
Right. From the start, we did make that clear that folks who don't already have, reimbursement for their work cellular phone or a work-issued laptop, that wasn't going to happen, other than there were 5 issued from the technology department, and those were 3 to finance and 2 to the water department, to make sure that those money transfers were happening. But that was put up front. But that's a good point, to make sure that that's in the agreement that folks sign, that those upgrades are not reimbursable by the town.
Now, what if a personal computer, laptop, what have you, crashes or something goes wrong? They try to blame the town for it, or something that was in a program they downloaded for the town, and it destroyed their unit. needs repairs, needs replacement, who's responsible for that?
That would be covered, that should be covered by our insurance. But the question is, and technically because they're doing town work on a personal thing, I think we would be liable.
Let me look into that.
But they'd have to like definitively prove it was caused by the connection into the town systems.
Right, thus the pissing contest.
It would
Potential.
become a pissing
Yeah,
contest, yes.
potential, yeah.
But there probably should be some release language, to Gary's point, in the telecommuting agreement that kind of clearly lays out.
This is Nancy. Do you mind if I butt in?
He's not going to Nancy.
I'm just wondering how many employees are we talking about that would fit this scenario where they're working at home on a computer?
There's actually a significant number. So at Town Hall, we have 33 employees, and we have, on any given day, about 12 to 15 in here over the last, 3 days, this today being the fourth work day. So, we do need their functions to continue, but we don't want people close enough that if one's contaminated, that we lose a whole department at the same time. And that was the whole idea of encouraging telecommuting for those who were willing, is that, we segregated the departments so that we had every department open and operating. So yeah, it's significant. It's more than half of the administrative staff in, say, library, council on aging, and in town hall.
So to add to that question, so this includes, so typically when we have discussions as our group here, it's just non-union workers. We're talking about union workers with these policies as well as non-union.
Right.
Right, this applies to all our employees during this emergency period.
Okay.
And is that inclusive of DPW, senior services, veteran services?
So it is. So in DPW, I'm not sure if we may have a couple of administrative staff, rotating in that case, but otherwise they're all on board. Public safety, public works are on board for the most part. But council on aging is skeleton crew, because otherwise we can't keep the separation. Same with veteran services. There's 2 employees there, and we have one at a time staggering, and the other one doing their completing their work product and calls and emails from home.
So we have the skeleton crews in the office, and then we have a bunch of people at home who, it sounds like some of them aren't, or possibly not really set up to work at home. Is that
None of them
correct?
are.
Yeah, so, I mean, that was, so we keep getting deeper into this, but I think everyone wants to encourage telecommuting. I mean, that's the whole idea here with,
Right.
keeping distance. And I think what'll happen is you'll find that a lot of people aren't equipped to work at home.
So
And the town then going to be able or willing to help them out in terms of creating that connectivity.
So we have everyone who is working remotely right now is set up to work remotely. And so, for example, folks who don't have a VPN connection to be able to access their desktop computer here at the town office they're working. But for example, one of the things that's been very important to me is to find a way to stop having breaks in succession when somebody gives a 2-week notice or retires, things of that sort. And early on in my military days, I learned that your first job is to start a succession binder so that the person who follows you knows exactly what you did up till the day they left, and they can pick up without losing any momentum. And that's something that, for the most part, we don't have here. And It's something we've talked about for a while, and this is our opportunity for folks who don't, either aren't set up, which most people are, or have a period where, say, their computer breaks or whatever, that we've told everyone, take a 3-ring binder and a notebook home and start writing down. And we've actually given a very formatted way of writing down your transition binder. And that's something that we have distributed to all departments. So to answer your question, everyone who is working remotely has the ability and the capability to do so right now.
We paying for their internet connections?
So the technology department has set up the VPN connections for us, yes.
Oh, VPN, okay.
Yes.
Technical terms I'm not up on, sorry.
No, but they still need, I mean, to get into the VPN, don't they have to come in either wired or wireless? I mean, they still got to have some sort of connection in their house, don't they?
At home, they still need to have some sort of connection, yes.
Okay, and are we, I mean, they would be paying for that anyway, so we're not paying them.
Correct. We're not paying for those home connections or Wi-Fi or the computers, anything like that.
So the concern is just the possibility that someone would download private information to their personal computer.
That's I mean, I think we've talked about a couple of things. I think putting into the, because I know we've got to move on because you guys, we've got a hard stop at 7, but putting in the telecommuting agreement, right, that for each person, whether they're using a town issued laptop or computer or their own, and then there's to be no downloading of any town information onto a personal laptop.
That's
And
something
just
that they have to just sign and say that they know that that's the rule. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be in the agreement. What were you going to say, Heidi?
I know that there is functionality, and I don't know how expansive our IT team is, but my husband works at a financial institution, and that's all tracked. Any downloads of company information, you can't email it out, and you can't download it. So I know that exists. I don't know if that's within the bandwidth of our small staff within the town, but just thought I'd mention it.
Well, something to look into.
Because it is a big concern. I think Tracy's right on to be concerned about that. That's big liability right there.
Okay, so I've
The
written
problem that you're
down.
going to run into, it's Brian, the problem that you're going to run into is the VPN to the office connection. They still have the ability to do things like screen printing and stuff like that. The point is when you're getting data out or you're trying to get data out, there's 10 ways to do it. And for the town to protect themselves against all those 10 ways, it's not going to happen this go around.
Yeah,
So
it's a firefight right now.
I would just say put broad language in the agreement that kind of covers you guys for 85% of the scenarios, and then, everything else you'll have to kind of work with it as time goes on.
Sure. So what I've done is I've taken notes on your concerns, and I will get together with our labor attorney as we draft up this this agreement that the employees will sign. But do keep in mind that anybody could walk in with a flash drive to their work computer and download. And I understand all your concerns, but we do trust our workforce. That they are reliable, but we will get these things into the agreement and run it past the lawyer and get folks to sign it.
The other thing I know you want to, but if somebody simply doesn't have a computer, I think what you were saying, Mike, is they have operating procedures, they have a telephone, they can still work remotely.
Absolutely. Most of
Not
the
said here specifically, but it's understood, I think, from the language.
right, yeah. Most of the work that a lot of our folks are doing is still telephone, and I'll take Council on Aging and Veteran Services for instance. They're calling up to 80 people a day from whatever phone connection they have. So if somebody on either of those staffs or our recreation staff, they don't even have to be on a computer to be actually reaching out to check in on our folks in the community, because now that folks can't come into some of our buildings, we feel that it's really important for us to be reaching out now that we've basically told people to shut in for their own well-being, but for their mental health, we know there's things that we can do to help in a time when we've got our senior population basically isolated as they should be. So yeah, we can do a lot with phone, and as I mentioned with our succession binders, we've made it possible for somebody to actually do very productive work, fill a gap that we know has been there for quite some time with just a pen and paper.
And Mike, I had just had one more question. Sure. It's Heidi. If the work from home request was not approved, are there any parameters around what would be approved, what wouldn't be approved? If somebody was already on a performance plan, would that not then be approved? That seemed to be not much said in that spot.
Sure. It's not specific there because it's going to be taken on a case-by-case basis. And I will tell you that we are tracking the work that people are doing. So I don't think a performance improvement plan would necessarily keep somebody from doing work from home. So I'm touching base with department heads every day. Department heads are touching base with their staff and supervisors every day. And then every week I get a work product report where the department heads are certifying that they have seen the work product that their workforce is producing. And they are holding that.
So, Mike, if you put in language, telecommuting is a work arrangement approved by the town in which some or all of the work is performed off-site, I think that might protect you on that particular point.
Okay, great. I missed that, but if you don't mind just typing that and sending it to me. We do have to move on because we've got school committee coming in about a half an hour. We've got 3 more policies to get through, but I really appreciate all this feedback. It's very helpful.
Where do you want to go next, Mike?
Emergency reassignment of duties policy. So in the side letters that we did agree between the town and the unions that, and we did, have talked right along about treating our non-union personnel in the same way throughout this as we are with our union personnel. But we talked about, the consideration for alternative work schedules, staggered work schedules, and we're just drilling down on that a little bit deeper so that, things change. So if, generally, if you might run into trouble if you're taking an employee whose work is XYZ and tell them to go do ABC, you could run into a problem here. We're looking to come to, or we're writing a policy that's saying, as things have changed, we may not have faced these situations before, and you may have been, driving a vehicle before, but we need you manning a pump right now. I'll give you one, for instance. In the past, our water department has, in general, traveled with 2 workers in a vehicle to do their work. Now, because of isolating people, we're making sure that we only have 1 person per vehicle. So that may change, what they're doing a little bit. It might require 2 vehicles going to a, to a work site to do that work. So we're changing the composition of their work a little bit, and we want the town to remain, to have that flexibility to do that, to get the job done. And we don't know what tomorrow's work may be, but we want to make sure that we can get it done and have the agreement, from all parties that we'll be able to do that seamlessly.
If we need to move, like if somebody's in finance doing clerical work, but there's clerical work needed in the health department, does it allow for interdepartment assignments, if you will? That's the right way to put it.
Yes, if it's similar work. So we wouldn't take someone who's let's say we're short on paramedics, so we're going to take a police officer and make them a paramedic, that sort of thing. Or even somebody who's let's say an assistant treasurer and make them the assistant town clerk. So we're clearly not going to do that. But administrative tasks with their similar duties, yes, we are going to be able to do that.
And then this is Heidi. I just noticed I didn't see any reference in there to that respecting any ADA accommodations.
So that's because we're already going to be doing that. We're always going to respect any ADA accommodations. So if somebody is,
Okay, I didn't know if that was going by the wayside or,
no, absolutely not. So we're
Okay.
still mandated to follow federal ADA, that act. So, and we will continue to do so.
My only question in this whole policy here was any requirement by an individual's personal physician to approve that person coming back to the workplace. Is that in the CDC guidelines?
So that would be in one of the, in the next policy.
You want to hop to that one, Mike?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if
go
there's
for
no
it,
more
Joe.
questions on this one, then we can go to the return to work protocol. So in that one, in the second paragraph under section 1, we do say that this policy mirrors CDC guidelines for return to work. So I think that answers your question, Dennis.
I have a weird ass question, pardon my French, is people, to procedure 2C, are people, like, what if somebody is feeling fine, but they can't, because the testing is so limited, they can't get 2 consecutive blah, blah, blah swabs? What if, like, they can't do that because they can't get the test done?
Right, that's a conversation actually that is ongoing right now. And so I spoke with the police chief earlier, and he raised that, a very similar question. And so I'm going to be talking to Deputy Chief Kenvin later this evening to see what provisions we can make in that regard.
Okay.
Good question.
I don't know, Mike, if you could follow up on that, the question I had about the physician in CDC guidelines.
Sure. So we are, looking to mirror CDC guidelines on that. I'm not sure if I understand your question.
It's, Dennis, does it get covered on the return to work protocol during COVID emergency? Section 1 purpose, the second paragraph. The first section purpose, second paragraph, the policy mirrors Centers for Disease Control guidelines for return to work. This says for healthcare workers. This is more than just healthcare workers. I think we've got to remove the word healthcare. But does that address your thing, Dennis? Because we would follow the guidelines from CDC, which covers the type of notes you need and so forth.
Okay.
Right, yeah, and that's my only question, is to make sure that was covered, that
Okay, so let me, I can see where that language can be a little bit unclear. So the policy set out by the CDC for healthcare workers, we're looking to use that model for any workers coming back to work. So I can clarify that language.
Yeah, let's clarify that, because
Yep.
this only looks like it's for healthcare.
Yep, good catch, Dennis, and we can clarify that, and I'll run it past our labor attorney to make sure we're getting the same meaning there. Thank you. Okay, anything else on the return to work? If not, we can get into the longer one, which is sick leave policy. So this is a lot of where we're going with the side letters, is to give some flexibility to the town to have continuity of work, and to employees who have to address things like, they're quarantined, or they've had exposure, or or their daycare is closed, or those sort of things. So this gets into it a little bit. And since those side letters were done, the federal government signed the FFCRA, or Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It's a pretty hefty act. I did give you the link in there. And what it gives is 2 weeks of leave that wouldn't normally be allowed. But this is 2 weeks for a 35-hour employee up to 70 hours, or a 40-hour employee up to 80 hours for the 2-week period, for this, for the 6 different type of scenarios that are listed on the second page of this policy.
But that's pretty much covered by the federal government, so we're just mirroring what they want.
Exactly,
Yeah, we're not reinventing anything there.
right. Yep, that's all spelled out by
You
the federal
know,
government.
this is the longest and most detailed policy, but to me, I only one question I thought was really well done. I think it covers all the bases. The only question I had was on the introduction, second paragraph. At the end, this policy attempts to address as many iterations of the impact, but recognizes that unforeseen situations may arise, necessitating a case-by-case determination consistent with the stated goal of extending flexibility to its employees. Having said that, in the final analysis, is it then up to the discretion of the employer?
You just want more protection for the town instead of just giving the employees all the protection, correct?
So that's going to happen, that's going to be a conversation that starts between human resources and the employee. If there is, in going through a case by case, a particular one or two cases, if there is some question, I'm going to be in communication with our labor attorney to get some clarification on that. And we do have to follow the federal guideline, but we're going to be looking to get backup opinion from our HR or from our labor attorney to so that we're in a defensible position, but also provide the flexibility that the employee needs to get through a tough situation.
Right, and that's really where you want to end up. But at the end of the day, there may be disagreements, and then at that point, how do you resolve it? I'm just raising that for your labor attorney.
Yep, good question. All right, I don't have the answer for that. Let me take that as a question. Good question. All right, any other questions?
Well, I'm just wondering how it came about that we're requiring employees to take all of, to exhaust all of their regular time off, before they would hit the extra 2-week. Because, what's happening right now is totally not under their control. So, they want to be coming to work, right? But
Right.
if, because of this pandemic, they can't come to work, I don't know. I'm just wondering if it's totally fair to make them take, all of their earned time, and then when this is all over, hopefully, whenever later in the year, they've lost all their time,
Right. So let me see if I can address that for you. So in municipal government, not just in Foxborough, but in general, the sick leave is generous. So 15 days of sick leave a year. And if I had someone that was sick 15 days a year, I'd have a problem on my hands. And this is affording another 2 weeks on top of that. So, I think it's not unreasonable. So in, a lot of places aren't.
Do they have to take their vacation time too?
So we're looking to use sick leave first, and we're looking to use this FFCRA first. So we're not looking to burn people's vacation time. Now, I will tell you that we are getting towards the home stretch of the fiscal year, which ends June 30th. And I'll read you part of a memo, because we have time, it's basically that we're offering to extend, normally, folks can only carry over up to 2 weeks of vacation into the next fiscal year. And that's what we do every year. And the town manager has put together a memo recognizing that people aren't going to have an opportunity, most likely, to take vacation this year. So he's affording people to roll that vacation over into the next year.
Oh, that's
And I can read you part of that memo. Yeah, I think that's, I think that's the right thing to do. The other thing is that a lot of folks have plenty of sick leave on the books. Like myself, if I'm out 1 day a year, that's about the extent of it. So I've got plenty of leave on the books. What we've negotiated with all of the unions is an opportunity to have a sick bank where folks can donate up to 1, 2, or 3 days into that bank, depending on the different contracts. And so somebody with an extraordinary amount of sick leave may donate a couple of days, so that if somebody runs out of sick leave, then they can go back into that bank. And that bank is controlled by the union members themselves, so that it's not the town deciding, no, you can't go into the sick bank and use other people's leave. And that's something that has historically been used for someone who's had a serious illness or something like that.
yeah. I remember that. I
We passed that.
Yep. So that's something that that would apply in this case. Now, I will tell you that some of the banks, although established, don't have days put into them, and we're working on that right now to put some time into those banks, because it is not our intent or desire to tap into people's vacation time. Their personal time, on the other hand, they cannot roll over into the next fiscal year. So if they need to use those 4 days of personal time, that's time that they may as well use, because they're going to lose it at July 1st anyways.
Right.
Hey,
Thanks
Mike.
for the information. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Hey, Mike, it's Brian. I just wanted to ask you quickly. I was reading on the state site about, the temporary provisions for COVID, and it looks like the first 10 days could be unpaid if the employee chooses to, right? But then the provisions take over. Are you saying that the employee had the right to use, sick time to cover that first 10 days? Is that kind of what we're hearing, or?
So I'm not sure where the unpaid is.
Okay.
So the Families First Act is paid time in the increments that it shows in that act, and we have to follow that. So we're not, as long as we've got people either working or sick or on accrued time, we don't see that we're going to have any unpaid people during this time. I'm not sure if the state is doing something differently, but we're not, as long as, people fall into that category, sick, using accrued vacation or personal, or working, we don't see people going unpaid.
Got it.
At-
I just wasn't
at this
sure
time-
if
at this time
employees are
anyways.
forced to use their sick time, or if that's a choice. Does that make sense, the question?
Okay, I see what you're saying. So if someone is in quarantine, okay, and they can't work, then that is sick time.
Understood. Yep.
Whether it's self-quarantine or mandated quarantine, or if they've had exposure, or, in any of the 4 different categories of when somebody would be in quarantine, that would be using their sick time. Now, there may be a case where somebody's, set up to work remote, and they need to work, and we want them to work, and they want to work, then we're not going to use their sick time, even though they may be homesick. If they can deliver work product for work that we need done, no, we're not going to charge them sick time for that, because the town benefits, from that.
For sure. Yep.
I think you've got check with, if somebody is sick with COVID, and they want to work, I don't know if they can work.
No, I'm not talking about from the workplace. I'm talking about at home.
I don't know if they can.
Why
Well, I
not?
think it depends on the
We had a big
severity of the symptoms. I mean, some people have very little symptoms.
Right, yeah, they'd be entitled to work.
Yeah, there might be some legality around it because it's a pandemic. I might be being paranoid, but you might just want to, it's kind of like, I'll give an example. I have people, and I know this is a little different, go on maternity leave, and they're on maternity leave, yet they're still working, and there's a liability associated with that for our company.
Okay.
I would just ask the question, even if they're feeling like, hey, I can totally work, if they're taking sick time, just check on the liability aspect of that.
Well,
Because
they
I've
wouldn't
had
be-
to actually
they wouldn't be taking
physically
sick
But
time.
if they're not taking time,
not taking
though,
sick time
if
if
they're
they're
not
working.
taking it as sick time, if they're taking it as working remote time.
If they're working remote, fine. But if they're taking it as sick time and still working, there's issues associated with
Right,
that.
no, that's what I'm saying. If they're working remote, they're not going to be taking sick time. But that is a good question to ask our labor attorney, so I will ask that just so that we're crystal clear on it. But no, if they're working, we're not charging them sick time.
No, I
But-
completely agree.
Yeah,
Just,
but we'll definitely
they're-
get an opinion on that.
I had trouble with a pregnant woman who wouldn't stop working, and then she ended up having some medical issues not related to her working. Well, she shouldn't have been, but there was some legalities around it.
Okay, yeah, I'll get that answer. Any other questions?
She was technically on a leave of absence, right? So,
She was technically using some of her PTO on her for maternity leave, and
Yeah, that's
but
the
she was
difference.
still working. I've just been almost sued so many times. I'm just a little paranoid.
yeah, well, you're bringing some good experience to Foxborough, right?
Yeah, me and my lawsuits. My biggest lawsuit has been over age
Gotta
discrimination.
move on. Getting late.
And I will tell you that by the time it had to go in front of I don't know, when the mass, whatever that thing is, you don't go to a hearing, you go to this thing. And the person just sued me because I worked for a company that had big pockets. And it turned out the person I ended up hiring was older than him.
So the only other question I had, Mike, is, and I've seen so many of these situations over the years. So let's say somebody, the policy says you have to use your sick time first. What if the individual would prefer to keep his sick bank pretty robust and prefer to use more of their vested time, whether it's vacation or personal time? Maybe not all of it, but some of it, and really save the sick time for a rainy day, because it does roll over and you can accrue it.
Yep, they can certainly do that.
As long as they're working from home, it makes no
Yeah.
difference to us. As long as they're working.
The personal time, as I mentioned, they're not going to be able to roll over. But if someone decides to use, in most cases, if somebody's homesick, they'd probably rather use the sick than the vacation. But yeah, if somebody said, I want to use my vacation and save the sick, we're not going to object to that.
Right, okay.
All right, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and wrap it up and let the school.
Just a real quick
Oh,
one,
yeah,
Mike.
sure.
At the beginning, did you say that people from the unions have weighed in on these policies yet?
No, they have not, because I've been developing these along with our labor attorney, over the last several days. I sent them to all the unions today with an introductory letter and just, let them know that I would like to get their feedback on them before we sign these into policy. So, I am hoping to bring these to the selectmen, tomorrow night. For a signature, but, that may not be possible, especially if there are objections. Our labor attorney, as well as our HR attorney, are both advising that for the protection of our employees and for the protection of the town's interest, that we do get these, these policies in place as soon as possible, now that the federal act is out. But yeah, it was really important for us to get the buy-in from the personnel board and also from the union. So I'm hoping that they can look at them quickly. I'll be, reaching out to all of them tomorrow by phone to see if I have an opportunity to talk with them.
Mike,
Great.
given it's a state of emergency, do they have to grace these policies, or is that more of
They
A
do-
nice gesture.
They do not. In fact, even when it's not a state of emergency, they don't have to be, they don't have to grace them. We can, the town manager has the authority to sign policies, into effect. And that they always come before the personnel board first. However, after that, the next time we're in negotiations, we need to, negotiate with them on these. So sometimes,
The one positive that the town should feel very good about for its employees is that the town will allow borrowing against accruals for FY '21 if you end up without any kind of bank. Everything's exhausted. That's a really nice feature.
Yeah, we think that's important. And then, as I mentioned, on the other hand, if people are working because we have to have them working and they aren't able to use that vacation time, we also want them to be able to use that next year when we're out of this whole thing.
And I think one more thing I would add is just, I think a lot of us, we're in this situation currently, but as we develop policies for this current situation, I think they will impact how we move forward even after this pandemic. Not to change any current policy, but just to have it in our thinking that, will we go back to business as usual, or will some of these policies and procedures continue forward even after we're out of this pandemic?
So these policies, as they stand, all have a sunset. And so the remote work will end when the selectmen, declare the end of the state of emergency, and no later than the end of December this year. And the rest of these policies will also expire. But to your point, we may learn things, from this, situation, as well as these policies, that we may want to carry forward, but we'd have to incorporate them into new policies. The remote work part, for, this policy will go away, and the remote work, for the most part, will go away as well. We feel strongly that municipal workers need to be, working on site. And, there are some positions that we could, station remotely or partly remotely. Those could be looked at, but we really need, 98% of our workforce, at the place where they work, because we have people coming in to do business at the, human resource or human services sites like, recreation, COA, veterans, at the library, we need our public works and public services folks to be, or public works actually out there doing the work. So we see the remote stuff as going away for the most part. With maybe there'd be some, a policy in the future, a different policy that would allow certain case-by-case instances, but we're not at a point where we're ready to address that. I do have the school committee folks starting to come in, so we need
I think you want to vote of the committee to
Yeah.
endorse this?
Yeah, would you want to?
Yeah, so if there's no other questions, is anyone willing to make a motion, assuming Mike is going to address those questions with Labor Council?
I make a motion for Mike to go forth and address these, present these to the appropriate groups, both with the town and with our attorneys.
Okay, second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor, one by one?
Just one second.
Oh.
So that was Tracy making the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
And so
Sorry, Brian,
Dennis,
second.
was that Dennis? Or
Dennis, I'm sorry.
So Dennis is an alternate to the board, so he's a non-voting alternate. So is there someone else who could make the
I
second?
second. Heidi?
Okay.
Thank you. So, we all in favor?
All in favor?
All in favor?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks.
Unanimous.
Thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate your time, cooperation on this, and look forward to working with you through this.
Thanks, Mike.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
job. We
Great job,
appreciate
Mike.
it.
Thank you.
Take care,
Great
everybody.
job.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.